Welcome, everyone. I'm Kate McKenzie, and I am the co-founder and current director of story and culture of the Secret 3K. Thank you for joining us today. If you have a question or a comment that you would love to leave for our special guest, please share your questions by posting a comment. We would love to take those, and we'll take them throughout. I'm so excited that you're here today joining us. And if you haven't yet signed up for the Secret 3K, I encourage you to do so. You can find out more information about how we're running, walking, and working together for equality during the week of International Women's Day at secret3k.com. So please check out that at the link that is provided here below. We'd love to have you join us. So each year, the Secret 3K partners with charities that support education and athletic opportunities for women and girls all around the world. And this year, one of the charity organizations that we'll be supporting is Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. And this is a charity that works in partnership with Afghan women towards improving human rights and providing opportunities for Afghan women to live their lives with dignity, certainty, and purpose. And this year, from every dollar that we get from Secret 3K, $1 will go towards the Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. And so I am incredibly excited that we have this partnership with this organization. I have nothing but respect for the work that they're doing. And I'm excited to be introducing you today to our special guest, Lauryn Oates, who is joining us today to share a little bit more about the work that they're doing. Lauryn is the Executive Director of Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. She is an incredible person, and she has her degrees in international development, human security and peace building, and language and literacy. And Lauryn brings such a diverse background to this leadership role. She's also a recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for her work in this area. And I'm just so honored to have her joining us today. If you've got a question for Lauryn, please leave a comment for us in the chat. We'd love to hear from you and ask your questions. Lauryn, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for the support to our organization and the work we're doing.
Well, it's absolutely our pleasure. I wonder if you could maybe just start off by sharing with us, Lauryn, what is Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, and how did it start?
Yeah, it's a 25-year-old organization thereabouts. Our origins are actually in the first Taliban regime, so we're sort of watching a movie that we've seen before, actually. So in the 1990s, when the Taliban became the government of Afghanistan, women in Canada were watching this, and they were outraged, and they really saw themselves in Afghan women and girls and thought, this would not be acceptable to me, so I don't accept it for them either. And they started mobilizing. And I think I can say, no one really planned to form an organization. It was a very grassroots movement that evolved and eventually became Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. So we started working to raise funds for underground schools in Afghanistan and support displaced Afghans who were living in Pakistan and other places. And then when the Taliban regime fell, we moved into Afghanistan and sort of operated out in the open and grew our programs and ended up focusing primarily on education because we really saw that as the shortest path to human rights and to empowerment. So we're all about the right to education and delivering really strong, high quality education programs for people in Afghanistan.
I love hearing that origin story because I think what stands out to me is that it started with very much this grassroots that just kept building. I think we've seen that with the Secret 3K too, right? Where that momentum just starts building, right? And I have loved seeing that so many of your volunteers from across Canada with Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan have joined us over the last 5 years for the Secret 3K, even as race directors or as volunteers or participants. And, I've loved that we've been able to, just see the success you've been having, training over 10,000 teachers, providing literacy classes to 5,000 students, establishing 40 community libraries. Like when we see this happening with you folks and we know we're supporting that work, it's been incredibly amazing. And I guess my question for you, Lauryn, is, now with the Taliban controlling Afghanistan, how has that changed how the money raised from the Secret 3K will be used this year by Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan? What kind of work are you doing now to support?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think people can see on the news we're in a completely different operating environment than we were 6 months ago. It's just kind of everything sort of flipped on its head. But one thing that has not changed is our mission, because our mission is extremely relevant to this situation. I mean, we're all about the rights of women and girls and speaking out for those rights. And I can't think of a place in the world where those rights are more threatened than they are in Afghanistan. So our mission is extremely relevant. And rather than do less, we're actually doing more now. So all of our programs that we've always run are still operating, but we're expanding them as well because we have new needs. So one need is emergency assistance. Afghans are facing a food security crisis that is, the World Food Program has actually called it the worst humanitarian disaster on earth right now. And you have the overwhelming majority of the population can't feed themselves enough to meet their daily needs. Something like 97% of Afghans are not eating enough. So it's very scary. And we're not really talking about the risk of starvation. That's happening. That's here now. So we're in an economic crisis that is a life and death issue. And, even though our core business is education, people need food. So we've also gotten into that business too, but in combination. So with the fact that girls' schools are closed for grade 7 up, and girls are stuck at home, and they have been for 6 months now, we do something called Learning Plus Baskets. So there's the learning materials, books, and educational materials so that learning can keep happening at home. And the plus is the emergency food assistance, so the things families need to survive. So we combine the two together and we get them to households. So that's something we're just going to continue doing as long as the need is there and as long as we can do it. In addition to our core programs like literacy education and teacher education and making sure people still have access to learning. So we've expanded our virtual learning platforms to respond to what's happening now, because that's a way we can kind of bypass the restrictions that are in place. And there's great demand there. And luckily we had the infrastructure in place. We were already doing technology for education work. And that just became really like hyper relevant in the current circumstances. So we do both the content, giving people access to courses and classrooms, but also the access. So giving little hardware packages and internet packages so that people can get online from home and take these classes.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate what you're saying, because yes, the focus is around education, but if people are hungry, there's no way that you can focus on learning, right? And so I love that idea of education plus, right? And how do we empower people to get the help that they need, and recognizing that, yeah, right now that food shortage is such a huge piece, and we're hearing that too from some of our friends that are still on the ground, that finding food for themselves and their families is incredibly difficult. And so really appreciate that you're taking on that humanitarian aspect. I want to pick up on something that you mentioned, because you were speaking about how, back in September of 2021, the Taliban dictated that, girls would no longer be able to receive an education beyond primary school. And I love that there's some of these virtual opportunities, but how can Canadians help around that? What can we do around that particular issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, firstly, donate, of course. These programs cost money, of course, and we're still sustaining a team of personnel in Afghanistan and programs there, as well as also trying to respond to displaced Afghans, because at least 1 million people have fled, and most of those people don't have permanent solutions. They're in neighboring countries. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They are also facing economic challenges. So so meeting the needs of both people in Afghanistan, but displaced Afghans as well. And the other thing is, with the virtual learning, that opens up, access for Afghans in their homes and Afghans who are displaced and anywhere. And it also opens up to teachers from anywhere, connecting with them. So we're trying to be this kind of matchmaking service. And we have a survey out right now where we're asking people to tell us what they can teach, whether that's, English as a second language, or, a university level course, or, a vocational skill, like anything at all. could be cooking, sewing. So we're looking at, basic education level, higher education, life skills, vocational skills, whatever it is. Tell us what you can teach. Tell us when you're available. Tell us what language you speak. And then on the other side of that, we're asking Afghans, what do you want to learn? What's useful to you right now? And, what are the conditions you can learn under? When are you free to get online? What kind of internet access do you have? And then we're going to match them up together. So we have 3 virtual learning platforms. One is a library of digital materials in Afghan languages called Darakte Danesh, or Knowledge Tree. The other is a courseware platform. So it's very similar to something like Coursera or EDX, where you go and take a course at your own pace. So there's no instructor per se, but you work through the material. But the third thing is called DD Classroom, and that's live. So that's, a person, a teacher on camera with the students on the other side, teaching and learning synchronously. So that's where we're going to be matching people up. So if people have something they can teach and they have some time, we ask them to tell us about it, and then we'll get back to them when we're ready to match them with the classroom.
I love that. And I'll just encourage people. I just posted in our comment the direct links there about where you can find that survey, and also encourage you to check that out on Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan's website to kind of learn a little bit more, whether you want to be on the teaching side or whether you know someone that would really benefit on the learning side, and sharing what they want to learn. And yeah, I've loved following what you folks have been doing, especially around providing some of those virtual opportunities for folks. I know that you've got some exciting announcements too around some work that's helping, especially for folks that are displaced in Tajikistan. Do you want to share a little bit about that sort of just newly emerging piece there?
Yeah, this is very fresh, and we're working really hard on this. So we're feeling a little pressure, but we're opening a school for Afghan refugees in Tajikistan. And it'll be girls and boys for all grade levels, and we're really excited about that and being able to meet their needs, because they don't have access. The people living in this particular area don't have a school, and that's the main thing they wanted when they were asked, what do you need? And we're doing that in partnership with another Canadian charity based out of Toronto called Jan's. So we're really thrilled to be working with them doing this, and excited that that's happening imminently, actually.
So exciting. It's great to hear, because I think that's a community that we also don't want to forget about, right? Is people that have been displaced, and so many folks have been, whether they were displaced a couple or displaced in the surrounding countries, right? And so how do we meet their needs too? I think it's incredible that you're already anticipating that and thinking about how could that need be met.
Yeah, and when you educate someone who is outside of their country of origin, you're investing in them. Should they go back, or should they settle somewhere else? Whatever happens, they're bringing this thing with them, and they may lose their source of income, their possessions, but they will not lose an education that will travel with them. And we saw that happen, after the Taliban regime fell the first time. Yes. And Afghanistan, welcomed Afghans back from all over the world. They brought all these skills and education with them. And we also know that it's very damaging when people's educations are interrupted for a long period of time. And the longer that time goes on, the less likely they are to ever go back to school. So we have to make sure people can keep learning, even when their situation isn't durable, where they don't know where they're going to end up. They need a way for school to go with them.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. And I mean, we've certainly seen some of our friends that are connected to the Secret 3K, whether it was the race organizers or participants in the Marathon of Afghanistan, and how having that opportunity to have access to education in the past has allowed them to resettle in other places. And it's been one of the key pieces that they've needed, right? Yeah. I kind of want to come back, just take us out a little bit larger perspective here, Lauryn, about, to ask you, what's the impact of this money being raised? How does it make a difference? I wonder if you could share with us some of the stories of, I know that there's all these numbers we can share, but how does this make a difference for women and girls just on the day-to-day?
Yeah, the best example I have, as a literacy person, my technical background is in literacy education, is the power of one person learning to read and write is really, really something. Like I've had the great privilege to actually see this happen in real life, to watch someone struggle to learn letters, and then eventually they can make words, and then eventually the words make sentences, and then one day it kind of all connects and they're like, I get it, I can read. And I've just watched this happen over and over, where a woman, something clicks and she figures, I could do this. Well, what can't I do? What's next for me? And I've talked to women in our literacy program who have said, I'm thinking maybe after this, I'm going to work on my PhD. Like, it's just like
Yes.
it's opened and they feel very empowered, even though, empowerment can be such an overused cliche word. It is the outcome of learning how to read and write. And if I, in our work at Women for Women, if we somehow contributed to one person having that power, that's something on its own. But we've been able to do that for 5,000 plus women, and so that's something that can't be taken away from them right now. And when Kabul fell in August a few months ago, I was chatting with a friend of mine who leads a large NGO in Afghanistan, and I was feeling very despondent and just saying, like, all the work we've done, all the effort to make education accessible for women and girls, like, we've lost it. And she said, these women who are now prisoners in their home, they're stuck at home, can't go to school. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to invite the neighbor kids over and they're going to teach them in their living rooms. They will not stop. They have this thing now that can't be taken. And the other thing about education is that it's intergenerational. So I have yet to ever meet someone who is literate who didn't also raise literate kids. It's irreversible. So you're making an investment in this one individual and all their offspring, all their future generations,
right.
Which is really something too. So even though, the work we do is not bricks and mortar, we don't build schools, we don't buy things, we invest in people, and that somehow can be, trickier to convey the power of that. There is power in it. And I think you see it in a situation like this, a crisis, an emergency, where people lose physical things, buildings get destroyed, people lose their possessions, but they don't lose their education. And, whether they're not able to use it, in the short term, later on down the road, it will serve them well. So that's, a huge area of impact. And another is in terms of how far the money goes. So we've long had this scholarship program in Afghanistan called the Shaffia Fund, and we are continuing. We've managed to find a way to keep supporting women's access to higher education in Afghanistan. And we will also be expanding that to support women to study in the region. That's in the planning phases right now. But in Afghanistan, a scholarship of a few $100s Canadian can enable access to a woman to higher education for a year or more. So, compared especially to our cost of higher education here or elsewhere, that money really goes far, and we select women where this money makes a difference about whether they go or not. Like, if they can't pay that tuition, they will not be able to enroll. And so we try to open that door through them through this relatively small amount of money, actually.
I love that. And I think it's incredible to just think about the power of, $100, $200 that can make on someone's life and be a life-changing piece for them. And I have one final question here for you, Lauryn, and that is, from the beginning, the Secret 3K has really stayed true to our values of promoting gender equality and active living while creating safe and inclusive events that are accessible and sustainable. And I wonder for you, why do events like the Secret 3K matter to you?
It's about community. It's always been hard for me to think of Women for Women as an organization. It sounds so, formal and cold. Like, we are a movement, and more than that, even, we're a community. We don't exist, without that community. We, of course, work with government sometimes and other institutions, but at the end of the day, we're sustained by the people who care about the work we're doing and who are part of it. And those include our partners who have their own networks that they then bring to ours, and where we find that overlap of mission and that synergy, and say, hey, we do this, you guys do this, let's work together and see what comes out of that. And it's very powerful. And I love in the 3K the on the ground element, the gathering. Now that we can kind of start to do that again here in Canada, people getting together and running and thinking about, that right and that freedom and its symbolism and what that means for the situation in a place like Afghanistan.
Absolutely. And we really hope that it does spark a discussion, for folks to think about how do we raise awareness around gender equality issues. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lauryn. It's absolutely a pleasure speaking with you. And I just want to encourage folks that if you are interested in making a direct donation to Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, or if you'd like to learn more, check out the links that we provided in the chat or also on the screen here below. And we'd love for you to visit CW4WAfghan.ca to learn more about the wonderful work they're doing. Thank you, Lauryn.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. If you haven't yet registered for the Secret 3K, I encourage you to do so. We'd love to have you join us this year and continue our support of Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. Thank you for joining us today, and I wish you all great runs and walks this week. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.